And that, brethren, is not good. So go with me also to Daniel chapter 9. I want you to give this context. Daniel chapter 9. The first place where we have the Messiah promise, as it were. Daniel chapter 9. The book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 9 in verse 25. I want you to see this. Daniel chapter 9 verse 25. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore. Take note of that word. Restore and rebuild. Take note of that word. Rebuild. Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince. I want you to see the coming of the Messiah is in the context of rebuilding and restoring. That's the point I want to labor to make. The Messiah that is ruling and reigning, that God is setting up, is coming in the context of one who rebuilds and restores. Think about that. He's not coming as an innovator. He's coming as a repairer to restore and to rebuild. So if your understanding of Christ is one who comes to build something new that is distinct from Jerusalem and the people of Israel, God says, beware. You may have taken upon yourself a different Messiah. It's quite possible. So we're laboring to make this point. Across in the book of Acts, chapter 15. Go with me there. Acts chapter 15. Acts chapter 15, this revelation is coming to us again. Acts chapter 15 from verse 15. But this, the words of the prophets agree, just as it's written, after these things, I will return and I will rebuild. Notice, rebuild the tabernacle of who? David, which has fallen. And I will rebuild its ruin and I will restore it, so that the rest of mankind may seek Adonai and all the Gentiles who are called by my name. So notice what God is doing. When you see Messiah, he's coming to rebuild and restore so that Israel and the nations can live under the tent of David. That's so important for us to grasp, brethren. So important for us to grasp. I look at the books of Ezra and Nehemiah to look at the rebuilding. When you read those books, you see Ezra, the word Ezra, we get that word, Be'ezrat Hashem, with the help of God. And we see Nehemiah, which means the consolation of Adonai. So he's saying, listen, I'm going to have to help you. I'm going to have to comfort you because you will be opposed. You will be resisted when you come and do this work of rebuilding and reconstructing. Sanballat, Tobiah, they will oppose you because of the Antichrist. Oh my God, help us. Go with me to Ezra, the book of Ezra. I want to just to point these things out to us again by God's grace. Ezra chapter 2, verse 68. I want you to see this. Ezra chapter 2, verse 68. This is about Ezra coming back from Babylon. And remember, he's coming back to rebuild, right? Some of the heads of the father's household, when they arrived at the house of Adonai, which is in Jerusalem, offered willingly for what? For the house of Elohim to restore it on its foundation. Notice the house of God needs to be restored on its foundation. We're talking about rebuilding. We're talking about the Messiah. All these are pictures for us. And then go with me to Ezra chapter 5, verse 11. Ezra chapter 5, you would take the time and read through these stories because I see what God is doing by his grace. And then Ezra is beginning to rebuild and opposition arises. And then he says this to those who oppose this building. He says this, verse 11. Thus they answered us, saying, we are the servants of God, of the God of heaven and earth. Notice, transcendent, eminent, and are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, which a great king of Israel built and finished. What he's saying is that a great king Solomon had built this and it was destroyed. And we are coming back to do what? Rebuild. We are the servants. What on earth is God doing? He is rebuilding and restoring. That's what he's doing. And he wants us to begin to see this thing, brethren, as we go forward. Oh, my God. And so you look and see Cyrus issued a decree that to let the Jews go back to restore and rebuild. As they begin to do it, there was opposition and the work stopped. And they have to go back and search. And Darius searched and saw where Cyrus really did do this. And said, listen, I issue a decree too. So look with me to Ezra chapter 6. Look with me to Ezra chapter 6. This is Darius now. He's searching through the books and he saw what Cyrus would have done. Remember, Cyrus is called also the anointed one of God. Once you see about anointed, you're talking about restoring and rebuilding, right? God is doing a work. So look with me at what breaking into this letter, 6 verse 11, and I issued a decree that any man who violates this edict, a timber shall be drawn from his house and shall be impaled on it, and his house shall be made a refuse heap on account of this. May the God who has caused his name to dwell there overthrow any king or people who attempt to change it so as to destroy the house of God in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have issued this decree. Let it be carried out with all diligence. Darius found in the writings that Cyrus had issued a decree. He said, let this be done with all this. Do you think God is saying us today? Do you think he said, let this rebuilding be done with all diligence? Don't lag behind in zeal. There's a work to be done. And I want you to see verse 14. And the elders of the Jews were successful in building through the prophesying of Haggai. So notice the builders are building. They are rebuilding and they're restructuring, they're restoring. But God says, while they're doing that, I have raised up prophets who will continue to prophesy to them while they build. It's not enough to just have the Torah. You also need the prophetic voice to bring out the insight of the Torah, to show you what God is on, what he's doing. And so notice prophesying of Haggai. What does Haggai mean? Haggai means the festivals. So what God is saying, if you and I can receive it, the festivals are a blueprint. When you find yourself keeping the festival and the festival is keeping you, you're prophesying about God's kingdom that is being restored, rebuilt. The king is ruling and reigning. And in Zechariah, who with me, God remembers, they finished building according to the command of God. This is what God is doing, brethren. And God is raising the prophetic voices to say, build, build, build. Don't come down. This is a work of rebuilding and restoring. You're going to have opposition, but prophesy and declare, because this work is unstoppable. It is inevitable. The kingdom of God is coming. It's unstoppable. Repentance is inevitable. The kingdom is unstoppable. It's coming. It's just a matter of time. You continue to build. Oh my God. Go with me to Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24. As we're talking about the Messiah, we're going to be bringing it home. I want you to go with me to Matthew 24 and see also this. Messiah prophesying in verse 5 said, listen, for many will come in my name saying, I am the Messiah, and will mislead many. How is that possible? I understand this verse in two ways. Many will come saying, I am the Messiah, meaning they themselves claim to be the Messiah. So people like Hitler and Mussolini, they claim that they were the politicians to bring redemption to the world. They come saying, I am the Messiah. So that's one, right? So somebody could come say, I'm the Messiah. Somebody wake up one morning and they say, okay, I am Jesus Christ. And they come saying, I am the Messiah. And unfortunately, you have many people who follow that person because they don't check the scriptures to recognize that this Messiah must be Jewish. He must uphold the Torah. He must raise the bar, and he must call the nations to know his Torah and to live them out. And any Messiah who is not calling us to that bar of Torah is a false Messiah and no Messiah. And so God has said, listen, people will come saying, I am the Messiah. But their message would also mislead others. How would they come? They will come preaching that I am the Messiah. This is not a person saying that they are the Messiah. They will come preaching that I am the Messiah. But in preaching that I am the Messiah, come preaching Jesus Christ, they will mislead many. How is that possible? How can somebody get on a pulpit and say, believe in Jesus Christ, and still mislead people? How is that possible? It is. Because he's warning us, right? So look with me to verse 23. Then if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will arise and will show great signs and wonders so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect. Behold, I've told you. If they say to you, behold, he's in the wilderness, do not go out. Behold, he's in a room, do not believe. He said to you, listen, this Messiah, I've not spoken this thing in secret. I've declared it to the world. Peter said, you are he, the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Because you see, if you don't receive the true Messiah, then you receive an anti-Messiah. And I'm laboring by God's grace to help us to see this point, all right? Go with me back into the book of Genesis. Go with me to Genesis, because we're talking about living after his sentence. In Genesis chapter 2, Genesis chapter 2, this week's our portion, and we open the scroll again and go through Bereshit. God impressed this insight into my heart that I believe he would have us to understand. Genesis chapter 2 verse 9 says, out of the ground, Adonai Elohim caused to grow every tree that is pleasing to the sight and good for food. The tree of life also in the middle of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I want you to see carefully. God says the tree of life is in the midst, in the middle, in the center of the garden. And also the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is not the one that's center. The one that's center, the one that's in the middle, in midst, is the tree of life. But look with me to Genesis chapter 3. When the enemy began to deceive Eve, right? You think about a picture of a serpent. Think about this majestic dragon coming, the appearance of this dragon speaking to Eve. All right? Look at verse 3, chapter 3, verse 3. He said, but from the tree, from the fruit of the tree, which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat from it, touch it, or you will die. Are you seeing the difference? It took me a while to see this, but I want to point out because this is the crux of the matter. We're talking about living from the center. God has said the tree of life is in the center of the garden. When Eve is talking to the enemy, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil becomes the one that's in the center of the garden. What has happened? How come she has become off center? What is happening here? This is the point, because you can read over this, but God has given us something. He says the tree of life is in the middle. She is speaking now, and in her deception, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil becomes the one that's in the middle. So she is off center. So the question I'm asking to you, brethren, are you living from the center? You and I, we need a new center. That's what the Spirit of God is telling us. You and I need a new center. I need to live. You need to live from the center of his love, where he dwells, where he speaks, where he empowers us. If we are off center, then we live in, oh my God, off center. And that creates problems. The father of lies deceives us. Oh, Father, help us to see this. Go with me, if you will, to Ephesians chapter 3. Ephesians chapter 3. Because God here is restoring something to us, brethren, that is precious as we begin to consider. Ephesians chapter 3. I want to give us Ephesians chapter 3. Please look at verse 17. So that the Messiah may dwell in your hearts through faith. That's the new center. And that you be rooted and grounded in love. The center of his love. We ought to be living from the true center, who is the Jewish Messiah. He lives in us. We live. Another one lives in us. And I'm saying that you and I have to be careful, because if he's not in the center, then we are living off center. We become the center. And if we live from our center, we're going to have problems. That's where the immaturity comes in. So look with me at Ephesians chapter 4. Look at the problems that's there in this. You need to understand this Shema. You need to, if you're not living with Messiah at the center, then you begin tossed to and fro by all winds of doctrine. You don't grow up in the Messiah. You are off center. You're off beat. All right. And then you begin to live like other Gentiles. Look at verse 17. So this I say and affirm together with the Lord, that you walk no longer just as the Gentiles also walk in the futility of their mind. Why are they walking that way? Because they are off center. If the Messiah is in the center of your life, then you live differently. Verse 20, but you did not learn the Messiah in this way. Look with me again to verse 22. That in reference to your former manner of life, when Messiah was not centered, when you weren't living a Christocentric life, a Messiah-centric life, right? You lay aside the old self. That's the wrong center, which is being corrupted in accordance with the lust of deceit, and that you be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And then he tells us all these things. The outcome of having the Messiah as the center. That's the point that I want to make to us, brethren, as we consider this. We got to live from the center where he dwells. And when we are off center, when we have been deceived by the father of lies, when we don't have an it is written response, then we live in off center. We are not balanced. We are living from the old self, not the new self. And I'm living by God's grace to help us to understand what God is saying in this week, in this portion of Bereshit. Go with me also to Matthew chapter 17. Matthew chapter 17, the Messiah who is the son of David, is speaking something to us. There is an account in Matthew chapter 17 where he says this from verse 14. Matthew 17 from verse 14, breaking into the account, he said, when they came to the crowd, a man came up to Yeshua, falling on his knees before him, saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic. He is very ill. For often he falls into the fire and often into the water. I brought him to your disciples and they could not cure him. And Yeshua answered and said, you unbelieving and perverted generation. How did the generation become that way? Because we moved from the center. How long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him here to me. Bring him back into center. Bring him back, bring him back, bring him back. He said to us, listen, this situation, remember, he's speaking to the generation. He's saying, listen, this current situation needs to change. You and I have problems. We have challenges in our life because we are off center. And the master is pleading with us, how long will I have to bear with you? How long do I have to put up with you? How long would you be living from your false self? This situation needs to change. We cannot continue to live off center. We cannot continue to live from our old self. We must live from our new self. Are we willing to pay the price, to fast and pray so that Messiah could be central in our life? That's what he said. Okay, we're back in Bereshit. I want you to consider this. What is the fall? When you hear about the fall, what is the fall? I submit to us, the fall is just a separation from his presence. He said Adam fell. Adam and Eve fell. What did they mean? They separated from his presence. They moved from having God center, and they put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil now and center. You begin to see what happened. They moved from a God consciousness to a self-centered consciousness. Say a self-conscious person is off center. You're operating from a different source. And that's why things are not working out. Oh my God. Can I submit to us? There is an unfallen position. The unfallen position is a vertical one, where you and I are standing erect, face to face with God. I have set Adonai before me. That's the unfallen position. The unfallen position is vertical. We are upright, standing erect. But then what would be the fallen position? What would be the fallen position? We are bent towards the creature. The fallen position is that we are bent. We are bent over towards the creature. And we are trapped in a continual attempt to find identity in the created rather than the uncreated. This is so important for us to see, brethren. Our unfallen position, we are upright. Messiah is center. We are in him. All right, we're living from that true self. Our fallen position now, we are off center. And when we are off center, we are trying to identify. We are bending towards the creature, the creation. And this is beginning to tell us something, brethren. So I ask me, who am I? Who are you? Who or what is my bent? And this is talking about in a negative sense now. What am I bending to? My fallenness will cause me to bend towards money, status, accomplishment, family, all these things. And what God is saying, listen, you need to renounce that idolatry because you're living off center. You're not living from his center. And that's what Abba is saying to us. In Luke chapter 13, there was a woman who was bent over for 18 years. Bent over, a picture of you and I. Bent over, a fallen state. The creature bending towards the creature. It's as if we are not living upright by eating from the tree of life. We are bending over to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And an enemy has done this. Oh my God. In Genesis chapter 3, go back with me to that text. Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3. I want you to see how this plays out in our lives, brethren, as we consider this. Genesis chapter 3. I want you to look at this verse in verse 16. To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you will bring forth children. Yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. He will rule over you. He will rule over you. Oh my God. Are you seeing what's happening here, brethren? Because a woman who seeks to find identity in another man rather than in Messiah is bent towards that person. But God is coming to loose you and set you back on track, to be on center, that you're no longer bent over, that I find my identity in a man, or find my identity in some role. Your identity must be in the Messiah. Anything else is bentness. There's a difference between living that's centeredness or bentness, as it were. God is calling us. He's calling us. He raises up those who are bent. He wants us to walk upright. And I'm saying to us, when we live off center, we live a bent life. What are you bent to? Did you